Hey everyone, welcome back to Bug Smasher. Wow, that was bad. Bug Smashers! Alright, hey everyone, we are here in my fancy dancy test level with physics debug on. I got a fun little bug that I supposedly broke the physics when items such as this gun down here gets attached to ships. As you can see, all the little gray stuff, that's all the physics meshes, and on the weapons and landing gear, it's not working. Yay! So the reason why I was told that this was my bug was we started, started splitting up a lot of our entity logic into these things called components. Originally with CryEngine, you really just had an entity and then something called a game object extension, and you had like all your logic in there, and if you wanted to do the same thing in another entity of another, you usually copied and pasted it because that's just how the engine was. Now we have this component system where we could build this little bit of logic here that could be used by this entity, this entity, this entity, this entity, any entity that we want. So we had our vehicles and our old items. They had a special way of physicalizing or getting physics and doing, becoming a rigid body and moving around and about. However, we had to, convert those over to our new physics controller, which will handle that for anything that uses it, but it also allows other components to directly read the physics information, and we needed that for the interaction system, and especially for 2.4, so that way we could query, we call them interactions, so that you could select certain things, but that's for a future thing. For now, I needed to convert everything over to a physics controller, and that will handle all the physics the same for every single entity that uses it. And unfortunately, phone calls, serious business. So unfortunately, after I checked all of it in and thought everything was working, I get a fun call from Andrew, our QA, and he has the most evil laugh there is. And as soon as I checked in the code, he was like, hey, I have this bug. I'm like, of course you do. So here's our good old weapon, and here's our good old ship. And normally the weapon will have its own physics, but when we attach it to something, it actually becomes physics of the ship. So the physics controller actually handles that. So when you're on your own, and then when you get attached, it makes sure it goes to the appropriate areas. And unfortunately, it had nothing to do with my specific physics controller. It actually had to do with something else, which is an attachable component. And for the longest time, we had special code for things to attach to item ports. But because we want to be more generic and we want to attach anything to an item port, we created this thing called an attachable component. If an entity has this, it could basically attach to things. So now we could have ships attached to item ports in a hangar. We could have players attached to an item port in a vehicle. You could have a clothing thing attached to an item port on a shop, you name it. And unfortunately, this attachable object expects another component called a geometry resource, which is another component which handles all the asset creation for how it looks. So you have a CGA, which is like our ship, which has like bones and stuff so it can animate, or it could be a pure geometry or skin, but either way, that geometry resource is the component to handle that. And unfortunately, since I made the item in the vehicle have the physics controller so we could use the interaction system, it also now has this attachable component, and this area right here, get viz flags, if we search for it. So when an attachable component gets attached onto the ship or hangar or whatever, and there's a thing called an attachment, we set certain flags. And if there's no flag set, like it's not visible, then we actually clear the physics because you can't see it. Why have physics? It's a saves on performance. This is for things like very far away you can't really see, or if we hide an entity, you don't want to crash into a random thing. And unfortunately, it's returning no visibility. And since our item vehicle aren't using this component yet, we're always getting 0 because this will be null. So what I did is use the default visibility. And what this says is if we're in third person, first person, or during the shadow pass, this thing is visible, it should have physics. And so now, if I compile this bad boy, recode, hop into the game, once recode's done its thing, aha, recode. So we don't have physics yet, but once I go to AI physics mode, bam, look at that, physics right there and right here. Oh snap. Because it's visible, we have physics. And if we move this guy away so he could animate or fall down, you could see that the physics actually moved with it. Woo! Having fun with physics. So as you can see, we had a fun little problem when we were trying to componentize our logic. And when I added that physics controller and interaction thing, we had no physics. So when I got a bug, everyone thought it was that big old change because I sent out an email. Turns out it was something completely different, but it was still related to a component. And all it was just default flags getting missed because we didn't have a certain component on our vehicle and item. So that got resolved and everything's going good. And we're going to continue splitting all of our logic up into these subcomponents so that you could have a generic entity and you just slap on whatever type of logic you want. And the other benefit of our components is going to be the ability to multi-thread all of our updates, which is going to be huge, especially since we want hundreds if not thousands of players on a server. You don't want to update the people far over there, but you want to update the people close by. So you have to be able to decide who gets what updates, when, how, and maybe we could update all of them at one time. So componentizing everything, good thing. Just makes the game faster, makes the game awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you next time.